Thank you, everyone. And it's good to have you all here. You know, there's a very important piece of advice they give you in rabbinic school. They say that if you're going to repeat a joke, you have to wait at least 10 years before sharing it with the same audience in synagogue. A story, 5 years. It's already more. But if you're going to share a thought on the parsha or something, you can share it the next day. No one's going to remember. So nonetheless, I will share this joke. There's a Jewish banker from Brooklyn who moves out to Utah. And he's there in Utah. He's working in the bank. And they decide that they want to give him a promotion, but he's Jewish. So the bank manager calls him and says, look, you know, you're doing well, you're doing good work, but nonetheless, you know, we're all Mormon here. So if you want to convert to Mormonism, there's a better chance for you to get a promotion. So he comes home to his wife. He says, look, I decided we're going to convert to Mormonism. It's good for my job. And they become Mormons. A week, 2 weeks go by. His wife wakes up in the morning. She says, have you lost your mind? Have we lost our minds? We're both Jewish. Our grandparents are Jewish. Everything we do is Jewish. We're going to be Mormons now. I can't live like this. You know, we have to be Jewish. All right. He goes back to his boss. He apologizes. He says, you know, I'm sorry. I know I said that I'm going to be Mormon, but I spoke to my wife. It's really not right. His boss says, of course, I understand. I don't mean to impose on you. Absolutely no worries. He comes back to his wife and he says, oh, don't worry. It's all good. We're all Jewish. We're Jewish again. She starts screaming at him. What have you done? What are you doing? We're Jewish again? He says, I thought that's exactly what you wanted. She says, yeah, but 2 weeks before Passover? So sometimes this time can be overwhelming. So we're going to go through the basics of Passover, how to make your house kosher for Passover. And I want to give credit where it's due. A lot of the materials that I got are from the chief rabbi of Gush Etzion, Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Rimon. He has a very good series on this, but also from other rabbis as well. So it's important to note when preparing for Passover and cleaning your house for Passover, you're actually cleaning it for two completely separate categories. You're not cleaning your house for Passover on one category. What are the two categories? You are not allowed to eat chametz, things that are made out of wheat or any kind of the grains and that has risen, but you're also not allowed to be in possession of it. Two completely separate prohibitions. You're not allowed to own this non-kosher for Passover illegal substance called chametz, but you're also not allowed to eat it. And the cleaning for these two categories is very different. Why? Because the prohibition on owning chametz only applies to chametz that's sizable. It's more than an olive size. So that type of stuff really doesn't sit around. Nobody here has chunks this size of chametz in their living room, right? No one has rolling around their living room. You don't have granola bars on the floor, I'm assuming. So that's the type of, when we say you need a clean for Passover, we're saying that to make sure you don't possess any chametz, you really just need to make sure you get rid of the chunks of the chametz that's visible, that's a real chunk. And that's very easy. No one would stress about that. That seems very easy. That's probably good advice any day. Make sure you don't have any Cheerios around your house. Make sure you don't have any whatever kind of chametz people have in chunks. Don't have any of it on Pesach. However, at the same time, there's also a prohibition on eating chametz. And for that, it could be very minuscule. So for that, you need to kasher your dishes. You need to make sure you have dishes that are kosher for Passover. That's a completely separate prohibition. So just when you're cleaning, let me give you an example. Do you need when I was a kid, well, my mom probably did it for other reasons, but when I was a kid, my mom had us all go through every single book, clean the dust off, and shake it out. Now, in terms of possessing chametz, even if there are breadcrumbs all over those books, we wouldn't have to do it because it's breadcrumbs. It's tiny. It's nothing. The Talmud says if it's smaller than an olive size, you don't need to worry about it. But if we would use those books on Passover and those crumbs would get into our mouth, then that would be a violation. And so if you ask me today, do I need to clean my books for Passover? I'll say depends. If it's books that you're not opening on Passover, of course not. Why? Because you're not going to end up, even if there are breadcrumbs in it, you're not going to end up eating from it. But if it's a book that you're always using, for example, let's say you put breadcrumbs for whatever insane reason anyone would do this. But let's say someone has breadcrumbs in their Passover Haggadah. Do they need to clean it? Of course they need to clean even the crumbs, because the prohibition on eating applies even to crumbs. And so when cleaning, just have those two separate goals in mind. Think about, am I owning something large? And for that, it's pretty easy to clean. Just make sure there's no chunk of bread or cookies laying around. But then you need to ask yourself, if it's something that's going to come into my mouth, then I need to even think on the crumb level and beyond. And we'll see soon what beyond means. Yes?
Oh, I don't know what to do.
Yeah?
Oh,
I'll speak about people going away and selling your house. Yeah, they lock it up. That's we'll speak about that. Now, even if you sell your chametz, etc., you need to make sure that there's no seeable chametz in the house that you're in, and that's why the rabbis put in the obligation to check your house, because there can't be any visible chametz that is right there. Another interesting fact that people will tell you you're crazy if you tell them it is. There's no mentioning in Jewish sources whatsoever of the obligation to clean your house. Nothing. It says you need to check your house. You need to make sure, well, it's kind of the missing link, right? You need to check your house to make sure there's no chametz there, but you don't need to clean it. No, but people throw in it clean. We used to clean the windows, and people throw in it. It's like the joke about the guy, he was cleaning and everything, and he was so frustrated because the Seder was coming. He says, why did God have to throw the Seder in the middle of the Pesach cleaning? Yeah, so sometimes people think that it's separate events. So anyhow, so a lot of times people clean beyond what is needed. Always remember these two guidelines. Is it something that I might eat? In that case, you really need to be meticulous. Or is it something that I will possess? And in that case, you only need to worry if it's actually a sizable chunk that you will encounter on Passover. Interestingly, the rabbis say if there's a place that has no chametz there, you work in the National Library, you work in those museums where you're not allowed to eat, those places do not even need to be cleaned or checked. If there's a place for sure has no chametz, not kosher for Passover whatsoever, for example, the Ark, no one would ever, sometimes people throw here candies, maybe, I don't know, and when there's a simcha, but generally speaking, there's no thought whatsoever that there's going to be chametz there. And so in that case, it's not a place you even need to check, never mind clean. So it's important to note that there's no obligation to clean. There's really an obligation to check and make sure that it's not going to be a stumbling block. Yeah?
Much as we all talk about hating all the cleaning.
Yeah?
It feels really clean.
It's nice to have a house that's clean, yes.
Psychic, cosmic.
Right.
It would be best if we kept the questions to the end.
Yeah, that's also true. All right, we're going to take questions in the end. We'll take questions in the end, but that's a very important point. Yes. Now, so just important to note, if you have an area that doesn't have chametz, so there's no need to check it or clean it. Very important. Also, cleaning is with regard to possession extends to places that are not your house. For example, if you have an office with a cubicle and you might have left there your granola bars or your cookies, you need to check that area. Why? Even if you won't be there. Why? Because there's a prohibition on possessing any chametz. So any place that has a history of having chametz in it needs to be checked and cleaned. If you have no history, there's no concern whatsoever that it's going to be there, then you don't even need to check it. Now, here's the most difficult, complicated point. Selling chametz to a non-Jew. Selling chametz to a non-Jew. So historically speaking, as Jews especially went into the liquor business, it became difficult to dispose of all of your chametz and get rid of it, which is when the custom came into place. By the way, the custom is mentioned later, it's not in the Talmud, of selling your chametz to a non-Jew. What does this do? Basically, you go to the rabbi, you don't sell your chametz to the rabbi, you give the rabbi power of attorney. And you say, Rabbi, I give you the authorization to sell any chametz that I have. Now, it's important to note, not everyone goes with this. I, for example, do not sell what they call chametz ben. I do not sell outright chametz. I will never sell a cookie or bread or Cheerios to a non-Jew. Even, Johnny Walker whiskey, I will not sell it. What do I sell? I have in my home products that are not kosher for Passover, but they're not kosher for Passover. So if you have jam that's not kosher for Passover, if you have any kind of materials that are not outright chametz, they're not cookies, it's not bread, that's something that I would sell. You sell it, the sale takes effect. The rabbi comes to Esau, or I'll come to Esau here, on the morning before Passover, which is the 14th of Nisan. Now remember that date. Why is it important? Some people who are going away, like you mentioned, they don't even want to check their house. They don't want to clean their house. They want to lock it up and they want to leave it as it is with all the bread and all the Cheerios that are in it. So what do you do if you're going away? If you want to be the scrupulous one, eliminate all chametz and make sure that it's all clean. If you don't want to be that person, what some people will do, we're going to actually send out this form, is they do what's called a mechirat yud gimel, a sale that takes effect not one day before Passover, but 2 days before Passover. This way, not only are you selling your chametz, you're leasing your house. You're leasing any space that has chametz on it, and you're saying, this is not mine, it is leased to Esau. And that way, not only am I not in possession of chametz, but I have no obligation to clean or check my house. So just remember, that's a double header. That's you're two birds with one stone, I guess they call it. The idea is not only do people sell their actual chametz, but they sell the house, the space that it's on, they lease it to the non-Jew. That way they avoid any obligation to even check or clean the house. So that's called a mechirat yud gimel, a sale that takes place not on the 14th of Nisan, one day before Passover, but it takes place on the 13th of Nisan before the obligation of checking your house even sets in. This same form of selling it 2 days before is used when? Very interestingly, by people who are, this is another halachic problem we didn't have 100 years ago, people who are traveling east by airplane. Why? Because when Passover begins in Israel, we're 7-8 hours behind. And so if you're selling your cookies to Esau and you're in Israel and Passover already began for you, you need to make sure that it was sold to him earlier, 8 hours earlier than everyone else. So people who travel east also make sure to do a sale, not 1 day in advance, but 2 days in advance, because they're ahead. Definitely, I was in touch today with someone who was in Japan. So definitely, I don't know if that's like 3 days ahead, but if you're in the Far East, right, you need to make sure that your chametz that's in New York is sold at a time where there's plenty of time ahead of the Passover arriving for you. So that's very important to note. So again, there's 2 types of sales. There's the sale a day before to avoid possessing chametz, and there's a sale 2 days before to avoid either having to check or clean your house, or if you're traveling east and you're in a very different time zone, to make sure the chametz has been sold on time, even though Passover has already started for you. So that's very important. But if you want to be basic and you want to just go with what the rabbis intended for it to be, or the Torah intended for it to be, you can check your house and make sure that it's all clean before you travel, which, as you said, is a good idea in general. And then do what I do, which is sell your chametz potential, meaning sell any a rice that you have, anything that's not been certified for Passover, but it's not necessarily bread. So that's what you can do. Again, there's a million places you can sell it, and online or in person here, and that's very important to do. If you're in your new room, you've gone to Florida, you're in a hotel. What do you need to check your room in Florida? It depends. So some people actually want to check, believe it or not, right? So you can actually check with a blessing. I learned that just today. You can check with a blessing your room in Florida, but stay tuned. I don't know if you'll be happy about this. If you eat a meal of chametz in your room in Florida, let's say 2 days before Passover, then you have an obligation to check it with a blessing, even though it's just in a hotel. So if you brought bread, shawarma, falafel, pita, whatever it is, pizza, you brought pizza into your hotel room, you ate it there, then you also check the hotel room that you're in. Basically, you need to check any territory of yours that has had chametz in it. So if you have 3 houses, all of them must be checked. If you are now in a hotel in Florida and you ate pizza in the room, that too needs to be checked. Sometimes it's with a blessing, sometimes it's without a blessing. And no matter what, make sure you do a sale, because the sale also covers chametz that you might have missed. Now, a lot of people ask, what do you do about medicine? Does medicine need to be kosher for Passover? So in general, anything like any kind of medicine that doesn't have a flavor, you do not need to have it kosher for Passover. You don't need to worry. You don't need no concern whatsoever. So if you have medicine that you take that is not flavorful, which is basically all grown-up medicine, you do not have to have it kosher for Passover. If you have children's medicine, and those are usually flavored, that does need to be kosher for Passover. I believe the Star K, which is a kosher certification agency from Baltimore, they have a list of what children's medicine are kosher for Passover. So just note that if you have any if you have any medicine, don't even worry about it. But what about vitamins? So if you have vitamins that are essential for your ongoing health, for example, some people take iron on an ongoing basis, not for funsies or for because they read it's a good thing, but that's actually what the doctor said, or they need that kind of vitamin. You need vitamin C, you need whatever vitamin it may be. That too doesn't need to have a hechsher because it's unflavored. But if you take vitamins for fun, or you basically take vitamins because someone told you that taking vitamin W is good for having a better sense of hearing, or whatever, people do these things, then you should make sure you get yourself a kosher for Passover vitamin, just because it's not really always a necessary case. So just have that in mind. Another very interesting point is, what needs to be sold? So you need to sell any kind of food that's not kosher for Passover, but also some people make sure that they cover things that are not sold. So for example, if you have a toaster oven, anyone here have a toaster oven? Yeah. So you have a toaster oven, you don't necessarily need to sell it to a non-Jew, but it does need to be covered. Any utensil that will not be used on Passover because of its criminal history, and by criminal history, I mean that it's had bread in it, basically a toaster oven, anything like that needs to be covered. Some people who have a break front, like a glass closet, I guess, in their living room, usually they cover it because you need to make sure that you're not using it. It doesn't mean you should cover it with tinfoil. Even if you get a sticker or tape, you tape the doors and you write on it chametz, that's good enough. As long as the point is, you shouldn't wake up Passover morning and take your non-kosher for Passover cup and make coffee with it, and then say, oh my God, I can't believe I forgot. So make sure that if you have utensils, kitchen utensils, eating utensils that are not usable on Passover, make sure those are marked. If you have an oven that's not going to be kosher for Passover, put a sticker on it that says not for Passover or chametz. That's also something that is very, very important. It's interesting. I don't want to offend the dogs today, but the rabbis say that if a food is not fit for the consumption of a dog, you don't need to even worry about it. So for example, that's why a lot of times we spray chemicals when we clean, because once food has been rendered unusable, you can't use it, it cannot be consumed by a human or a dog, then it's not chametz. So even if you have bread in your house and it's just not consumable, it's from 5 years ago, then there's no problem with it. Someone told me, he said, my dog won't drink Johnny Walker whiskey. So does that mean you don't violate the Passover prohibitions? No, it just means the rabbis say if something is not fit even for dog consumption, but if you're going to drink it, then it's considered fit for eating. But that's the litmus test the rabbis put. It's the dog. If it's not appropriate for a dog, then it's not a problem. Which is why there's a lot of debate around some perfumes, deodorants that have actual alcohol in them that is consumable, and it's made out of wheat. So some people get into all these debates: is it consumable? Would an alcoholic drink it? All right, we're not going to get into that, but that's just something that's important to have in mind. Now, when you talk about your kitchen, there's a very big difference between what you're going to be using on Passover versus what you're going to be checking. So you don't need to check your toaster oven. Why? Because even if there are crumbs there, you're not going to be using it, and they're too small to be in violation for possessing them. But you do need to have a sticker on it saying, chametz. On the other hand, if you're going to use your Passover, if you're going to use your toaster on Passover, then you're in, there's a lot that needs to be done. So you'll forgive me if you don't have every single one of the following utensils I'm about to describe, but I'll go through the kitchen and how to make your kitchen usable and kosher for Passover. So let's start with stovetops. Stovetops, there are 3 or 4 different types of stovetops, right? What are there? You have different kinds of stuff. The gas is easiest to make kosher. Why? The gas stovetop, basically you have 3 parts. There's the burner, there's the bottom, which is basically the tray that's on it, and then there's these grates, right? So what do? So number 1, before you make anything kosher for Passover, you got to make sure it's clean. And by clean, since you're going to be eating from it, I mean absolutely clean. You take a spray, you clean the surface, you make sure there's no crumb, no leftover. You good? Yeah. No leftover anything. That's number 1. Number 2, you wait 24 hours. The rabbis say, whatever it is you're going to make kosher for Passover, wait 24 hours after you've cleaned it. Why? Because 24 hours, it's considered that any remnants of food that are in it sort of expire. So number 1, you're going to clean it. Number 2, you wait 24 hours. Next, a lot of people in this case cover with tinfoil. You cover the top with tinfoil. Before you put the tinfoil, keep the burners on for about a half an hour on the highest heat. That way the burner becomes kosher. The actual grates are harder to make kosher because you need a blowtorch, but sometimes you can buy on Amazon a small blowtorch. Some people coat it with tinfoil, which I don't think that's safe. Yeah, don't set your apartment on fire. So the grates, but the good thing that we have today that sort of, we didn't have 10 years ago, is a lot of these items, whether it's trays for your oven or whatever it is, can be ordered on Amazon very easily. This past year, we decided we were too lazy. We couldn't clean our stovetop for Passover. We just bought on Amazon 2 burners for like $30. So a lot of things that people didn't used to have in the past are accessible today. Whether, you would never dream as a child to have a blowtorch in your house, right? But you go on Amazon today, you get a cheap blowtorch. So a lot of things changed in the sense that you can just easily, you can buy exactly what it is that you need. So in terms of the stovetop, the grates cannot be easily koshered, but unless you have a blowtorch. But even if you don't have that, there are many who permit it if you just hold it briefly over the fire, or if you dunk them in boiling hot water, or again, it says cover with silver foil, but I strongly discourage you from doing that because I believe it catches fire. So in that case, I would say just rely on the opinions of putting it in boiling water or just buy a new one. And the top, like I said, keep the gas on high for a half an hour, and then you'll be good. Now, does anyone here have a ceramic or glass stovetop? No? The ones that turn, so everyone here has gas? All right, good. So we got the easy way. The easy thing for gas, number 1, you'll make sure it's clean. Number 2, you will keep it unused for 24 hours. Number 3, you'll turn the burners on high for about a half hour in a safe way. In terms of the grates, either get new grates or pour hot water over them. Or hold them over the fire, but for that you'll need some kind of like I don't know, something safe to hold it over the fire. But those are the things you need to do. But most importantly, make sure you do the waiting 24 hours, making sure it's clean, and turning on maximum heat for a half an hour. All right. But for those who have, I don't know if online anyone watching has a glass or ceramic stovetop. Good news, if you're Sephardic, it's very easy. By the way, obviously, many things are easier if you're Sephardic, but Passover is much easier if you're Sephardic. And so Sephardic Jews easily just turn them on. They do the same thing. They clean it, they pause for 24 hours, they turn it on highest, voila, it's kosher. That's if you're Sephardic. But if you are not Sephardic, it takes more than that. What do? You take please don't laugh, by the way. You take a pot, you fill it with hot water, you turn it on. What's going to happen if your pot is filled to the top with hot water on the stove? It's going to boil over. Some people even take like a big spoon and have it pop out. And that way the hot water overflows on the ceramic top. So you have a double koshering. You have the burner being on its maximum, and also you have the hot water pouring over. But if you're Sephardic, all you need is just to turn it on for a half an hour. Make sure it's clean, pause for a half an hour. Make sure it's clean, wait 24 hours of not using it, and then 24 hours later, turn it on maximum for a half an hour. Magic, you have a kosher for Passover stovetop. So that's some Ashkenazim I see may want to convert for the sake of Passover. But look, there are some Ashkenazim who don't even make kosher a glass stovetop at all. Now there's something called an induction stovetop, which I think I've seen, but I don't have. That's a stovetop that basically works. Anyone see that once you pull the pot off, it gets cold? And once the pot's on, it's hot. Anyone ever see those? There's these stovetops. Basically, it's like a magnetic field, and it only heats when the pot's on it. So with that, also, you do the same idea. You clean it, pause 24 hours, turn it on maximum, and if you're Ashkenazi, you put the boiling water and let it overflow and boil over, and that way you make it kosher. If you are using a hot plate or a blech, anyone have those, a hot plate? So if you want to make that kosher for Passover, also very easy, same formula. By now you should tell me the formula. What's the formula? Clean, make sure it's clean, wait 24 hours, and heat it up for an hour. Now, in the case of a hot plate and a blech, you're also supposed to, if possible, cover it with tinfoil, thick tinfoil, not the thin tinfoil. But again, make sure it's in a safe way, because if it's not, the whole house can burn. And that's also, by the way, it's just a general good time to remind people to make sure your smoke alarms are working, because unfortunately in the past month, there have been 2 families that had a very bad fire in the Jewish community. So it's just a good idea to do. Tables. What do you want to do if your table is kosher for Passover? Just make sure you clean it, have 2 tablecloths, not 1. And if you generally have very hot things, this is a good idea in general. If you generally put hot things on your table, so get a new one for Passover. You know those cork or cloth, what do they call them? A trivet? Do you know what it is? What's it called? When you want to put a pot on your table, what do you do? What do you call it? A trivet. All right. So if you are, for cleaning your table for Passover, you don't even need to do the 24-hour thing. Just make sure it's clean. Get 1 layer and a second layer, which you anyways probably do, right? You have the like rubbery layer, and then you have the tablecloth. Usually that's good, but if you're going to put something extra boiling, and this is just a general good idea, also put a trivet. Good idea. All right. So the table is very easy. Don't worry about your table for Passover. Now comes the oven. Some of the new ovens have a very cool feature that makes it very easy. Anyone ever hear of self-clean ovens? Yeah. So if you have an oven with self-clean, you're in luck. Why? Basically, you make sure there's nothing in there, you clean it, and then you just, as its name indicates, self-clean. So you just put it on self-clean, and you're good. The grates, it's all good. It's the easiest thing in the world if you have self-clean. If you don't have self-clean, like me, what do? Same formula as I told you before. You make sure it's clean. You use a spray, a safe chemical spray. You clean it. You wait 24 hours. Once you've waited 24 hours, you turn it on the maximum. But if you don't have a self-clean, you have a problem, because the trays need a extra koshering. And so for that, I tell you, either go on Amazon and order new trays, or there's ways to make the grates, people cover them or whatever it may be. But yeah, you have to switch the grates. If you don't have a self-clean, you have to switch the grates, or heat them up a lot. All right, now arranging your kitchen. make sure your products are kosher for Passover. How do you know if your product's kosher for Passover? Is what? I was surprised by this. If you take a look on the products, if it says OUP, that stands for Passover. If it's parv, they'll spell it out. I thought it should have been the opposite. I thought they should spell out Passover, but I believe that when it says OU and the letter P, then it is kosher for Passover. If it's parv, it spells it out. Not only that, if you take a look online or at the entrance to the synagogue, you will see the OU guide. They have a list of products, even without a kosher for Passover, can be used on Passover. There's a bunch of products that are just generally, I don't know if it's orange juice but that type of stuff that probably nothing much going on there, right? Probably no one dipping cookies in your orange juice. So therefore, even though it's just an OU, you still can have a it doesn't have, even though it doesn't have an OU with a Passover certification, you can still use your rest of the year. However, don't use anything that was open before Passover on Passover. So for example, if you have cinnamon, if you have, usually it comes up most with spices, ketchup. Don't use the ketchup that you used before Passover on Passover. Even if it's kosher for Passover ketchup, don't use it on Passover, right? Why? Because anything that was open in the presence of the non-Passover, a lot of people, by the way, restock. They use Passover to restock. Why? They clear out all their closets, their fridge. It's hard to do this with spices, but they restock on a lot of things because you cannot use items that were open before Passover on Passover itself. So that's something very important. Now, how to make your dishes. Anyone here have an interest in making their dishes kosher for Passover? Okay, so but people do it on a Kiddush cup, right? You have a silver cup, you got it from your grandfather, whatever. People have, anyone here have those like sentimental silver? Yeah, silver cup. So people do make some things, even if you're not, to make your forks and your nice kosher for Passover is very hard. But people make kosher for Passover, especially sentimental things, silver cups most commonly. So what do you do for that? You're going to take either you're going to make your pot kosher you're going to take a pot and you're going to boil water in it. And basically, as long as you've dunked the cup in the hot water, it's kosher for Passover. The problem is, which pot do you use? Do you use a kosher for Passover pot, but then the cup is going to unkosher for Passover, or do you use a non-kosher for Passover pot? The answer is you have both options. You can either use a non-kosher for Passover pot, but first boil it with water so it itself is kosher for Passover, or you can take a kosher for Passover pot, boil out water in it, put the cup in it, and then you'll re-boil water on its own in the pot to make sure the pot itself is kosher for Passover. All right, so either you're boiling the pot before you did the koshering in it or after. That's the difference between kosher for Pesach or not. I hope it's not too confusing, but I tried to... basically, if you use a chametz pot, you need to kasher it before you use it for the Passover stuff. And if you use a kosher for Passover pot, you need to kasher it after you've used it. And of course, you need to make sure it's a pot that wasn't used in how many hours? 24 hours. Yes. Now, I honestly, 1 year, I had to kasher a few things. I had no patience for this. I went online. I bought a very cheap pot. I think it was $10, this huge pot, which I would never eat from or wish on any of my enemies. But I used it for koshering. I got a $10 pot. I filled it with hot water. I didn't kosher it before or after. I just filled it with hot water. I did my koshering and I threw out the pot because that's all I needed it for. That's something that's makes it easier. Countertops. What do you do about countertops? So what do you do with countertops? You make sure you clean it. You use a cleaning material. You don't use it for 24 hours. And here's where I recommend having towels on the floor. You pour hot water on every spot on the counter, and that way it's made kosher for Passover. What are most people's countertops made out of? What do you have? Marble? Some people, what? Formica, some people have, very rarely, some people have stainless steel, and some people have like the granite, like those are very expensive. Yeah, but most people have Formica. So if you have the stainless steel or the granite and you did this process of cleaning 24 hours in hot water, you actually don't even need to cover it. But most of us don't have that. And therefore, once you've done the cleaning, waiting 24 hours, pouring hot water, we still cover it with, what's the name of that paper? Toby was telling me she does it. What's the name of that paper that sticks? The contact paper, maybe, where it sticks, and you use that to cover. There's all kinds of different things you can use to cover it for Passover. So that's something. But even then, a lot of people don't use it for anything too hot on Passover. All right, your sink. How do you make your sink kosher for Passover? So again, if you have if you're lucky, you have a stainless steel sink. You basically clean it thoroughly, use some spray to clean it, wait 24 hours, pour hot water all over it, you're all set. If you don't have that, then just make sure that you either buy a sink insert. Has anyone seen those, the inserts? No? So you can just Google it, you'll see a sink insert, they're like $10, $15. Then people get a sink insert, or if you don't have a sink insert, just make sure that you're not using your sink with anything too hot. So on Passover, if you've done this koshering and you don't have stainless steel or a sink insert, just make sure the water is never too boiling hot. That's never over, I don't know, what is it, 45 Celsius or 100 Fahrenheit, considered boiling, like that you can't touch it. So that is what you should do. Now, dishwashers. By the way, I should say, anyone here have a microwave? Microwaves are the easy. Okay, good. You're in luck. The microwave is the microwave is the Jew's best friend on Passover. Why? Because the microwave, all you need to do is make sure it's clean. You clean it out, you wash it, you make sure you didn't use it for 24 hours, and you take a styrofoam cup. Don't think I'm crazy, by the way. You take a styrofoam cup, fill it with soap water, and you turn your microwave on for 10 minutes. Not in a way that it splashes, in a way that's it's reasonable, like not in a way that in a way that it's just steam. Some say you should do it twice, once where you put it and where the cup, the cup is there with the hot water and with the soap, and then others say, okay, but now what about the spot that the cup was on? So they move it one spot over, so also that spot gets covered. But basically, microwave is the easiest. You take a cup of soap water, put it in, boom. After you didn't use it for 24 hours, you have a kosher for Passover microwave. So microwave is your best friend. Of course, again, make sure there's no piece of macaroni or cake or whatever sitting in it before, and make sure it's clean and that you didn't use it for 24 hours before you did this process. Dishwashers. Anyone here use a dishwasher on Passover? Some people I know don't even do it at all. But if you want to do it, according to the OU, it's not possible to make a dishwasher kosher on Passover, but according to Rabbi Rimon, it is possible. You wait 24 hours, you clean it, you remove the racks, you clean it very well, you remove the filter, and you basically pour boiling water on the racks, which is hagala, and you take them out. Then you do a dry run, and by dry I mean only no dishes in it. So you put soap inside the dishwasher, inside the compartment that you usually put it in, both inside the main area and in the compartment. And you run it once, some people do it twice, and that way you make that kosher for Passover. Hot water urns, you're in luck, unless you're one of those people, I hope you're not, that make your challah hot on your hot water urn. Are you one of those people? If not, you're in luck. Many say actually, you don't even need to kasher it. Many say you don't even need to kasher it. You just make sure, if it wasn't used with bread or anything unkosher for Passover, then you just make sure there's no crumbs on it. Boom, you have it. But others say you just heat it up with hot water, keep the what do you call it? The spout open for 10 seconds, pour hot water over the spout for 10 seconds, and it's good. But there are many people who say you don't even need to make it kosher for Passover. So good news, you heard it here first. Your hot water urn, throughout Passover is going to be very easy. Many say you don't even need to make it kosher unless you're one of those people who make your challah. Who are those people? Make your challah hot on your urn. Anyone ever do that or see that? All right, some people do it. Some people put their challah on their urn. Those people are in trouble, but that's what you do. It's very, very easy. So between a microwave and a hot water urn, your life should be easier. Coffee machines, I'm personally not a coffee machine person. Some people are. It really depends on the type of coffee machine, and it depends on the coffee itself. But let me ask you a question. If you're Sephardic, you can eat rice on Passover, right? Let me ask you a question. Let's say you made your kosher for Passover rice. I now want to use your pot to make my Ashkenazi kosher for Passover food. Can I use your pot? No. So number one, if it already was done, meaning let's say I didn't know you made rice in it, and I used your pot to make chicken soup, and you told me, oh, I just made rice in it, for sure I can drink the chicken soup, no problem. But if I'm going ahead of time and I'm asking if I can use your pot, then I have to wait 24 hours and then I can use it. So it's important to note that this whole discussion of coffee brings up also the topic, because some of the coffees are apparently kitniot, and so which is what only Sephardim eat on Passover. And so there's a lot of discussion of whether Ashkenazim can share the dishes of Sephardim. The answer is more than you'd think. Now, pets on Passover. Pets on Passover, believe it or not, what? Well, their food. What about their food? Believe it. Well, we said there's a prohibition on eating, and we said there's a prohibition on possessing. There's even a prohibition on benefiting. You're gonna laugh. You're gonna get a good laugh soon. But if there is pet food that is outright chametz, you're not allowed to own it. If it's made out of wheat and bread, some of the feeds that they have for animals are like bread of some sort. So you're not allowed to own it. So what do? So first of all, the CRC, the Chicago Rabbinical Council, has online a guide of all the kosher for Passover pet food. I guess they researched it. They know which have wheat and which don't. The pet? Well, it depends what it eats. But now here's the part you're going to laugh. If you have a pet and it has very specific food, and you can't, it has to eat, right? Then what some people do, I hope you have good relationship with your neighbors. If you have a non-Jewish neighbor, you make sure that for Passover, you give the non-Jewish neighbor the food and even the pet, and you say, this is yours for the next 8 days. And hopefully they're thoughtful and nice enough to do it for you so that you don't own chametz on Passover. But that's sort of a nutshell. Bird's view of making your house kosher for Passover. Most importantly, don't stress too much. I know that sounded pretty stressful, but don't stress too much. Make sure that everything that you have has the kosher for Passover mark, and come to the Seder. Look, everyone prepares in different ways. Everyone arrives at the Seder somehow, right? We all get there one way or another. So now if anyone has questions, comments, you're welcome to. Yeah.
Could you go back to coffee? What about a Mr. Coffee machine? What do you do with that?
So your number one question you want to find out is the coffee that you use putting into it not kosher for Passover? Because a lot of coffees are either kosher for Passover or they're just kitniot. They're not actually they don't have chametz in them. They just have some rice, or not rice, but an item that is not for Ashkenazim. So the number one thing you want to do is to find out what's in it. And then what people do is they'll do 1 or 2 empty runs. You'll take only hot water and run it twice after you haven't used it for 24 hours, and that way you kosher it. So just don't. Yeah.
In my office,
yeah.
I use my office, and there are non-Jews that use my office. I cannot dictate to them what they must eat during Pesach. What do I do about the office?
That's a very good question. I believe that as long as it's not in your possession, it's okay. So I think as long as it's not, I guess you can put a notice and say that any chametz they leave is not, it's theirs. It's not yours. You cannot possess it. So do whatever you need to make sure. I'm gonna follow up with you on this question because it's a very good question. So I'll repeat it also for everyone who didn't hear. So he's asking, I have an office and there's non-Jews who are working in it on Passover. They can bring their crackers, their cookies, their whatever it may be. So remember, the prohibition is on possessing it. So as long as you're not gonna possess it, then you're okay. So just make sure that they don't, make it clear that it's not yours, right? If they leave their cookies, those cookies are going to the garbage. You're not keeping them, right?
And I presume similarly, apartments that I own but rent out to others.
Yeah, so the same idea. You're not in possession of it. It's there, right there, renting it. And so it's not for you to worry about. As long as this is actually a question already discussed in the Talmud, but basically you don't own, right? They can do whatever they want with that chametz. You have no right to walk into their house and start munching on their cookies. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Correct. So as long as it's, look, and by main I mean the only prohibition with regard to chametz is possession and eating. Well, also benefiting from, but you're not, if you tell me I'm in the chametz business, that would be a more complicated question. But you're not possessing the chametz, you're not eating it, and you're not benefiting from its sales, right? You're not a shareholder in Nature Valley or Cheerios. So again, as long as you're avoiding the eating and the possession, and you're not benefiting from profiting off chametz on Passover, you're all set. Fair enough? But what people do is they do include the address. When you fill out your sale of chametz form, they do include the address of whatever house or office they own. And like I said, if you want to avoid the obligation of going to every house and office to check it, then I suggest doing the Mechirat Yud Gimel, the sale 2 days before Passover. That way you avoid the need to go and check the office. You just lease it to Esau for the days of Pesach. You're not even the whole office. You're just leasing the areas that have chametz in them.
If I have, for whiskey, if I have a separate cabinet which I lock and put a sign on that it's chametz, and sell that portion of my apartment, is that acceptable conduct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just a portion. You're selling the actual whiskey to Esau. He's the person we sell to. So in the form that you fill.
There's a problem with that. What if Esau comes and wants to have a drink?
That is something you must concede. You can take two paths when it comes to whiskey. You can either take my path of getting rid of all your whiskey before Passover, or you can sell it to Esau, but risk the possibility that he come to your house and have a shot, or have all of it. It's his. Now, there's actually a news article about this fellow, a fellow named Michael Brown. He used to buy almost all the chametz in New York. This guy owned many millions of dollars of chametz on Passover, and occasionally the rabbi would make a point to show up at random people's houses so that he can show that he actually owns it and that this is not just a joke. The sale of chametz has to be fully sincere. And yeah, you have to be mentally prepared for the option of him showing up and drinking from your whiskey. It doesn't really ever happen, but it's there. That's the agreement. Yeah. After Passover, right? So you have your dishes from Passover. You used your dishes from Passover. You put them away after Passover, clean. You don't need to clean them this year before you use them. As long as they haven't been touched, yeah. So the same idea as checking chametz. If nobody put chametz in that area, you don't need to check it. You can own thousands of acres and not need to check them for chametz as long as nobody put chametz in them. I can't think of an example of a place like that, maybe a national library or, even the Library of Congress. I don't know if no one's bringing any cookies in there. But the point is, if you have a place where you know for sure there is no chametz there, there's no need to check it. There's no need to sell it. There's no need anything. All righty. Any questions here before we finish up? Do you have to do bedikat chametz in your office? The answer is yes, you need to check for chametz in your office, but you don't have to do it the night before Pesach. You can, if you have an office where no one else works, just take a look. Let's say you're leaving a week before Pesach. Take a look, make sure there's no chametz, and you're done. If you have a concern, for example, you have non-Jewish workers, etc., then you may want to do the Mechirat Yud Gimel form, the form selling your chametz 2 days before Pesach. That way you don't have to check it. But in general, you do need to check every place that is in your possession and that you might have brought chametz there. All right. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everyone's kind words and questions, and for bearing with me through all the many, many, many details.